Should you stretch? Should you not stretch? And if we do stretch, how much should you stretch? When should you stretch? How do you stretch? Those are all very good questions that hopefully we'll address in this video. Now, remember, our goal for stretching is to improve the range of motion of the joint. And so in order to improve the range of motion of the joint, we have to follow some guidelines. So to help us go with the guidelines, we're going to use again what we call the FIT principle. F standing for frequency, I standing for intensity, T standing for time, and then the other T standing for type. The first we're going to start with is F, and F stands for frequency, or how often we should be doing it. The research shows that at a minimum, you should be performing a stretch for it to be beneficial 2 to 3 times per week. Recommended though should be daily, should be stretching daily. If you're trying to take your hamstring and you're trying to lengthen it, we should be spending time every day on stretching that tissue. So the next one we're going to look at is intensity. How intense should a stretch be? And ideally, we want to be able to take our muscle and lengthen it until you feel a stretch is felt or till slight discomfort. Now, we want to make sure that we don't go into severe stretching or really pulling on it, because sometimes that can actually trigger a reflex from my brain saying, ooh, something's going on here. In order to protect it, our brain has a capability of making things tighter. And so in order to protect the tissue that you're trying to stretch, it will actually make it tighter instead of looser. So it's recommended you take the tissue until it's, you feel the stretch is there, and then we hold that. And the next thing we're going to talk about is T for time. And ideally, most stretches should be held for at least 30 seconds if you're looking to try to lengthen the tissue. Now, if you're just looking for a good stretch on the muscle, 10 to 30 seconds is totally fine. But if we're really trying to truly lengthen the tissue over time, then at least 30 seconds would be recommended, preferably up to a minute, or even sometimes, depending on how tight something is or what we're really trying to accomplish, we may even go longer than that, even up to a few minutes or even longer, just depending on what is needed to happen. But for most people, 10 to 30 seconds for a good stretch, at least 30 seconds if we're trying to lengthen the tissue. It should also be noted that it is recommended, if you're going to be stretching, that we get around 60 seconds total of a stretch in order for it to be effective for a specific joint. So for example, if you're going to be stretching your calf for 15 seconds, then I recommend that you do 4 sets of it to be able to equal a total of 60 seconds amount of work. And like I was saying before, if you really want to try to lengthen the muscle, you want to be somewhere between that 30 seconds, at least 30 seconds, preferably closer to a minute. If you can get a minute of stretching, that's going to help elongate that muscle more effectively. And the last T stands for type. What types of stretching should we be doing? Now, there are a number of different types of stretching that you can do. We're going to talk about them briefly in this video and how we can apply them to certain instances. The first one that we're going to talk about is probably the most traditional form of stretching, which is static stretching. And static stretching has been shown to be effective in, again, lengthening the range of motion of a joint. This is where you take the muscle, you lengthen until you feel a stretch, and then you hold it statically for a certain period of time. And that is a static stretch. Most of the time, you want to do this after the muscles have already been warmed up. So if you're going to do some static stretching, a lot of times it's better to put the static stretching off until after exercise. And it's actually been shown that it can actually reduce performance if you do it before exercise. And so if you've got a basketball game and you're going to go warm up, maybe avoid doing your static stretching until after the basketball game, because it can show that it can reduce how explosive you are or how fast you can run, or reduce your performance that you're wanting to do. The next type of stretching we're going to talk about is Pnf stretching. And a good example of this type of stretching is if I were to stretch my hamstrings, I would lay down and then I would take a rope or something, or have a buddy get up underneath my leg, and we take my leg up to where I start feeling my hamstring is stretched. Then, as soon as I feel like my hamstring is being stretched, what I do is I try to take my leg and I think about trying to push my leg back down towards the ground, which activates my hamstring. Now, the trick with this is that you don't actually move the leg as we kick down. You're just thinking about trying to push the leg down, which activates it, what we call an isometric contraction, where you're actually activating the muscle without moving it. So you push down on your buddy or push down on the band or your cord that you're using, and you hold that for about 3 to 6 seconds. and then you relax. And when you relax, you then bring the leg up into the stretch again for about 10 to 30 seconds, and we hold that. And the way this works is that the muscle is aggressively holding on and has lots of tension in it. By activating the muscle, and then the act of letting it go after that activation allows that muscle to be able to completely relax into that stretch, which helps it lengthen over time. The next type of stretching that we're going to talk about is dynamic or slow moving stretching. And a good example of this is where you are taking your body into end ranges of motion, but you're doing it in a very slow way. We're not holding it in those periods of time. We're not holding it in that end range, but you're taking your body through its available range of motion slowly and controlled. And this is a good one to use for warming up. So if you're going to be warming up for your basketball game, or if you're going to be warming up for said activity, taking your joint through its full available range of motion before you work out is actually a good way to be able to introduce movement to the system, and allow the joint to be able to have free movement and not be stiff and wound down. The last type of stretching is called ballistic stretching, which is not recommended for everyone. But if you are playing a sport that has a lot of plyometric activity or a lot of explosive activity, or you're having to react really quickly to things, ballistic stretching may actually help kind of activate some of the systems and get them to be woken up before you play a sport. An example of ballistic stretching would be where you are using the weight of your body momentum to stretch. So for example, if you take your leg and do like leg swings where you're kicking your leg up in the air and then coming back down, that's a good way to ballistically stretch the muscle. Now, it again should be noted that this probably has the highest risk of injury with ballistic stretching, so really make sure that your tissues are warm and ready to go before you start some sort of ballistic stretching. I hope you guys found this video beneficial. If you have any comments, then leave those down in the comment section below. Be sure to like our video if you liked it. If you guys have any questions about whether stretching is appropriate for you, or what does a specific stretching routine look like for you, give us a call and we can definitely take a look at the way you're moving and what it looks like for you to move, and make recommendations based off of whether you need to stretch or whether we need to stabilize your system. You guys have a great day.